Welcome to session 2 of the FarmTek Leadership Series, Giving and Receiving Feedback. In this session, we're going to talk about some of the most important factors of feedback. When do we give it and why do we give it? And how do we give it so that we can empower our staff and our team to be able to use it for continuous improvement? We are constantly faced with feedback. And one of the biggest things we have to ask ourselves is, are we seeing feedback as a way to grow, as being helpful, or are we seeing it as a way to stay stuck or hurtful or to create drama within the workplace? How are you currently using feedback? Are you the type of person that only gives feedback if things aren't going well? Or are you the type of manager and leader who goes around and tries to find the positives and point out specific feedback to individuals who you believe are living up to your expectations? In session 1, of course, we talked about the importance of having a definition of how you see success for yourself as a leader and for your team, and what you currently do to encourage and let people know what your expectations are. So it becomes essential to be able to give feedback on how they're doing, because everybody wants to know, how am I doing? Especially your new staff members. Feedback is probably one of the most important things to do within those first 30 days, even within that first week, trying to give as much feedback as possible on what's working and maybe some advice on what they could do a little bit differently. That helps set the tone that we are a type of organization that likes to give and respond to each other in ways that can help us improve and move forward. If you constantly see feedback as hurtful and you're like, nobody likes me, everybody's kind of getting down on me, I want you to ask yourself, why is it that this is important to them? What are they sharing? How can I change so that I can, again, increase my influence? Sometimes people tell me, you know what, Lisa, I don't need to change, they need to change. And oftentimes I say, as a leader, it's about taking feedback into consideration and asking yourself, is this going to help me get to where I want to go? Or is this just hurtful feedback that I need to ignore? And when you start to ask yourself how you're going to use it, it helps us determine if we're going to see it as an opportunity for growth or if it's going to be a setback. And I'll tell you, our whole lives, we have been directed through feedback. If you use any type of reward system, a behavior modification system, if you bring breakfast pizza because somebody was able to meet a sales quota, or the quality line was positive, or you got some customer feedback, you are reinforcing a behavior. As kids, maybe we participated in sports or things that got us trophies. That is a piece of feedback. How are you doing? If you got playtime, or again, even if you weren't, maybe you did something that people didn't like, you got yourself punished. People who are motivated either by being achievement oriented or trying to avoid punishment. And what is your definition of success. You know, if we do this, then you'll get this. If that happens, then you get that. And we are constantly evaluated on a set of standards. So we got to know our audience, and we have to know, how do we give and receive feedback in a positive way? The one thing I always encourage leaders to do is to make rounds finding things that are going well and being specific to say, hey, Joe, you know what? I really liked how you were able to do this. Looks like you're on track for today's quota. You know, thanks for putting a little bit extra effort. I know I asked you to do something that was outside of your job description, but I really appreciate the assistance, and here's how this helped. Know your audience. Find ways to catch them doing things well and giving them feedback on it. And sometimes people will go, well, gosh, why do I have to constantly give positive feedback? It's because we want to know how we're doing, and it helps us feel appreciated. If people are recognizing us for jobs that we're doing well or things that we're going above and beyond to do, that appreciation factor is going to keep you engaged within the workplace, and you're going to feel more connected. So know your audience. We are looking at results. We're constantly giving feedback on results. Hey, we were able to get this on this truck. We were able to ship it at this time. Hey, the customers was receiving it in a timely fashion. They were excited to be able to get this. We are focused on results and we give feedback towards it. That is what we consider quantitative measurements. We use things like our KPIs. We use things like our sales quotas. We use things like our attendance rates, our retention rates. These are all results. And it goes into this whole circle of feedback. Many of us give feedback on quality of work. Hey, I really like how you're doing this. Can I give you some feedback on how to even do it more efficiently? Would you like to know what other people have done in your position so that they can increase the quality? Again, you're giving people feedback on their quality of work. I'm noticing this. Again, you're doing a really great job. Or, you know what, I've noticed this. What's the situation? And, you know, have you thought about doing this? Other people have tried this. Again, quality of work. We also give feedback on efficiency. How many of you have ever told somebody, hurry up, the truck's waiting, hurry up, they're at the dock, hurry up? That's feedback. And that again is the idea of efficiency. You know, if you're doing any type of value streaming, any type of continuous improvement, give feedback on this. Here's some steps that maybe we can take out. Here's some ways that we can make this more efficient. Give that type of feedback to groups. We also give kind of feedback on initiative. You know, we can give negative feedback when we feel as though people are being lazy and you're like, man, why don't you ever come to work? But we can also give positive feedback for those that are taking that extra step and getting rewarded. You know, how many of you have ever had somebody say, well, you're showing favoritism? And yeah, I am showing favoritism. Do you want to get on that favorite list? Because here's what I'm looking for. Dialogue your expectations again. And I always like to comment on initiative. You know what? Thanks for finding new things that can be done. You know, every time we have some downtime, you're the type of person that goes out and does some problem solving. Tell people what you like, what's the situation, what's the behavior, and what's the impact that it has. And when you get into initiative, again, you're asking, you know, am I critiquing on personality? You're critiquing on behaviors where people are asking questions, where people are finding out things that could be done without having to be told. They are, again, focused on meeting needs that maybe people haven't expressed yet. So let people know. I really like how you were able to call that client, how you were able to foresee that this could be an issue, how you're able to resolve it really quickly, and keeping the customer satisfied. That's initiative. We're rewarding accountability with that initiative. You know, hey, thanks so much for taking this on. You know, this was a deadline at 4 o'clock. We are excited that you're able to meet this deadline. Now we can do this, this, and this with it. Reinforce that initiative. We also give feedback on creativity. You know, this is where you want to be able to ask people, you know, try something new. See how it goes. What worked? What didn't work? There's what's called 20% time or genius hour, where people are given time within their work week to try to be creative and find new ways of doing things. There's one organization that created their own Shark Tank, where basically you had 24 hours, you could do what you needed to do to try to streamline a system, and then you had to pitch it to the upper management. Again, that creativity, reinforcing that creativity. You know, I really like the fact that you were able to find a problem-solving solution to this. I really like this recommendation. Every time you come to me, you give me some type of recommendation as to what could be done. Reinforce that. Positive customer feedback. I always encourage people, the minute you get some type of positive feedback from a customer, try to make that as visible as possible. Letting people know, and again, sharing what people are saying. You know, we've got Yelp all the time that people go out and look at feedback on what people give, you know, and again, taking some things into consideration, but we're constantly giving and getting feedback. And then how responsive are people to feedback? A lot of times people will say, I like that I can just have an open discussion with you. I like that we can share ideas without you getting frustrated or angry with me. I really like how we just have this open line of communication and we don't get stuck in silos. Hey, I like how you don't get your ego all jacked up when I'm asking for, if I have some questions for clarification. Responding to feedback. Sometimes we ignore people because we think if we give them feedback, it's going to be kind of like explosive and it's going to be a tough conversation. So I'm just not going to give them any feedback. And then you ignore things, and whatever you ignore, you allow. And then now people are like, well, that's not fair. Why does Joe get to do this? Give them feedback on responsiveness. Every time I bring something up to you, you seem like somebody who's taking it into account. Looks like you're focused on it. I appreciate the fact that you're understanding where I'm coming from. That's, again, giving feedback on feedback. And the big thing is ability to take ownership. This is that accountability factor. That's when we have to reinforce, if we have a deadline, I love the fact that you were able to get it done before the deadline. I love that we were able to get this on the trucks ready to ship before 4 o'clock. This was a great work and testament of how well we could work together. What's the situation? What was the behavior? And what was the impact? Because we were able to get these on these trucks sooner, we had the opportunity to take a couple of hours off. Whatever it is, honor people's accountability and give them feedback on, hey, I really like the fact that you've met that deadline. Now, if somebody didn't meet the deadline, take in that same feedback form. Hey, what happened? Help me understand. Have you ever thought about trying this? This is what other people in those situations have done. I'm asking you which option would work. Here are 3 things. Which option works for you? Ability to take ownership becomes essential. Then you got to look at this idea of ultimately knowing, what am I doing that's great today? And what am I doing that's average today? And what am I doing that maybe sucks today? So you have to get these expectations down. And of course, your homework from session 1 was to define success and what those expectations are. And we give feedback based on those expectations. What does great look like? Well, great means that you're showing up on time, and on time means you're showing up 15 minutes before your shift and you're ready to get started right at your shift. Or great means you're taking initiative. You're going out and finding problem solutions instead of just sitting back and asking me and waiting for me to tell you what to do. You're problem solving. What does great look like? Keep reinforcing that. And be ready to kind of understand if somebody does give you feedback yourself, how are you going to use it? Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to take that into consideration. Or, you know what? I really didn't realize that. Thanks. There's times when you want to listen. And if you've got a team where there's high turnover, or if you have a team where there's a lot of drama, that's when you try to listen to some things. That's when you want to say, okay, what's working here? What do we need to do different? And if somebody says, you know what, you're kind of a micromanager, then ask things like, well, help me understand, what does that mean to you? Can you give me specific behaviors that I'm doing that might consider me being a micromanager? Don't get all upset and basically say, no, I'm not a micromanager. You're wrong. That is not going to be an encouraging situation. Take it into account. You know what? I didn't realize I did that. I had somebody who was working for a company, and every time they'd go into a meeting, they would have a huge agenda. And they started to talk about all these different things, and people walked out of the meeting more confused than when they walked in. So they called this person the Tasmanian Devil. If you've ever watched Looney Tunes, the Tasmanian comes in all like blah, 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 and says 100 million things and kind of destroys things and walks out, and people are left going, what just happened? When she was faced with that, she was like, I didn't realize I did that. And again, she became aware to say, well, no wonder people aren't wanting to step up and volunteer for things. I'm spreading us too thin. Maybe I need to focus and look at what our big rocks are. So again, became very self-reflective. And leaders are the types of individuals who are self-reflective. They take into consideration what people are saying if it's impacting their relationship status with people, maybe their retention rate with their team, maybe the productivity of their team. And then there's times where maybe you just need to ignore it. Don't get caught up too much in the whole big drama. If somebody says, we've been all talking about this and we think you're this. Okay, what do you think I could do differently? Here's what I'm doing. Here's my side. Help me understand, using that kind of verbiage. There's time to listen and there's time to ignore. You've got to be able to understand what your definition of success is. If somebody's just coming to you to complain and whine, then again, choose to ignore it. If there's somebody that no matter what you do is never going to be good enough, sometimes I choose to ignore it. When you listen and when you ignore. And there's 3 stages of receiving feedback. Within 90 seconds of any type of situation that happens, our brain is automatically processing and perceiving what happened, and we're deciding if we're going to lose it and react, or if we're going to just respond with, that's interesting, tell me more. Reaction is the step where, again, you may say something you regret. So I always like you to think, how can I focus on understanding their side? But then how can I again encourage their understanding of my side? And where are we on common ground? Can we get to a yes? And it also requires EQ. And if you don't know anything about EQ, this is what we call emotional intelligence. This is where you're again having empathy, concern. You're taking into account other people's perceptions. You're asking some questions. And when you do that, you are lowering people's defense mechanisms so you can have some of those conversations. You know what? Thank you for your feedback. You're here to teach me something. How many of you have gotten feedback from somebody you don't particularly like and you say, thank you for the feedback, I appreciate that. And then tell yourself, you know what? They're here to teach me patience. They're here to teach me something. The second step in any type of feedback is just taking a moment to reflect on it. Be honest with ourselves, be open-minded about what other people are saying. Now, there's times where people are going to be haters. And of course, as the old song says, haters are going to hate. But realize that, again, if there's some value to it, I want to take this into consideration. Did I do the best I could with what I had at the time? And if you can end your day saying, you know what, I did the best I could with what I had at the time, then keep going, keep moving forward. Calm your emotions if you need to. If somebody's giving you feedback and they're telling you all the things you're doing wrong, you might get defensive. If they're telling it in a way of you have to, you should, you better, they may be sounding like a parent. And a lot of times people say, I don't want to be managed like I'm some child. So recognizing again that we've got to calm our emotions. If somebody says something that heats you up, try to, again, process it with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What do I need to do to have this conversation with somebody? And ask, you know what? I appreciate you sharing this with me. What would you have preferred I've done? What would you want me to have done different next time? Here's what I can do. And getting their perception and reflecting, what is it that I could do better? If a lot of people are saying the same thing, then there's an opportunity. If it's just 1 or 2 complaining, whining, moaning about stuff, then again, I'll say, take it into consideration. Don't get caught up in it. That's 1 or 2 people. But if you have a majority of people doing different things, or maybe, trying to call in sick a lot, then you got to do some reflection and ask yourself, am I giving enough positive feedback for people? The third step is, of course, responding to the feedback. And as always, we respond in ways of, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. Highlight why you appreciate it. Here's the situation. I'm glad you brought this to my attention, because then we can kind of work through this and see a better way to do it. Are you ready to try and make this better? Here's what I'm hearing you say, validating what people are saying. Here's what I hear you saying. I hear you saying you're frustrated. I get it. It's been a frustrating time. There's a lot of things that we don't have control over, but what do we need to do to move forward? What are areas we agree on or disagree on? And then what are our next steps? That's how you respond to feedback. So if somebody basically says, I don't like the way you manage or lead. Well, how would you like me to lead? What are your preferences? What behaviors do you see? I realize that maybe you and I have some disagreements. What do we need to do to move forward? Again, Not necessarily asking everybody to be best friends with each other, but you have to have that common respect. And when you respond, you get that respect piece. But it also requires you to really reframe your thinking. Sometimes we see feedback and we go, oh God, I don't want this. I don't want this feedback. And oh man, they're going to tell me feedback and I'm going to be in trouble. Or, I don't know what I did wrong this time. We've got to reframe things so we can see things differently. Anytime, again, somebody wants to give feedback or evaluate, I say, bring it on. Share with me. What can I do 1% better? What am I doing really well now that I can continue to move forward with? Maybe is there a quirk that I do that I didn't realize I did? Again, trying to reframe things. How many of you have ever had somebody say, well, you're just a micromanaging boss. Everybody's always micromanaging. Or you say, I have a micromanaging boss. You know what? Reframe it. They're not micromanaging. They just prefer more details. That's all. When do I need to give them some details? That's a big reframe. You know what? They don't see it my way. Well, instead of using that kind of language, and I hear that all the time, well, they just don't see it my way. Well, they're just as passionate about it as you are. And so maybe we need to understand, why are they fighting so hard for what they're fighting for? And I like to ask that question. You know what? You seem really passionate about this. Why are you fighting so hard for this? And then again, reframing, this is the person who's trying to ruin my life. How many of you have ever had somebody say that to you as a manager? Man, you're just trying to ruin my life. Well, you know what? Thank you for teaching me patience. Thank you for teaching me grit. And thank people. Thank them for giving you an example of what you don't want. Thank them for giving you an example of what you do want. And let go of our martyrdom. Sometimes in feedback, we have a tendency to take it personal, and then we might get stuck in what we call martyrdom syndrome. This is where ultimately you think that you're the only one can do it as good as, you're the only one that can do it. Nobody else can do it as good as I can. And I always like to say, sometimes done is better than perfect. But recognizing that if you get into this martyrdom and you start getting feedback from your staff, like, nobody appreciates me, I'm constantly having to do everything, and this isn't fair, I do more than anybody else here, that's awesome. Share with them how awesome that is. You know what? I realize you've been asked to do a lot of things, but here's where I see you doing so well. These are great things. You're stepping up to the plate in this area. What can I do to continue to support you? Get them out of that martyrdom syndrome. Get out of the martyrdom syndrome yourself. When you do that, you can also have some feedback conversations. Hey, if somebody's coming at you and they're giving you a lot of challenging feedback, you can always ask, what would you have preferred that I done different? Can you give me an example? Maybe how I could have handled it better. Ask them for their specific expectations. If you're angry, upset, I'd like to take this afternoon to think this through. Let's meet again tomorrow. If you need to step away, if somebody gives you some feedback and you're feeling a lot of frustration or a lot of anxiety or angst, basically say, you know what? I appreciate the feedback for today. I really want to think on this. Can we get back together tomorrow? Do that before you lose it. Sometimes people are like, I wish I would have just told them I'll talk to them tomorrow because I was blindsided by what they said to me. And I automatically just vented, and I shouldn't have done that. When we vent, it's kind of like pushing toothpaste out of a tube. When we vent, sometimes we can't take back what we say, just like we can't push toothpaste back in the tube once it's been pushed out. So be cautious on, again, the way you are using your emotions. Do what you said you would do. If you're unable to take action right away, explain some reasons, thank the person, tell them why feedback's important to you. And maybe you have to acknowledge that, sometimes it's hard to hear some of these things, but we want to get these things out on the table so that we can learn and grow and move forward. And follow up. Sometimes we don't do a good job of following up. Check in. What worked? What didn't work? How can we do this better? That's your continuous improvement model. Asking your customers who maybe had a bad experience, Hey, what worked? What didn't work? What do we need to do to build our trust back up? What are some steps that we can take if they're a customer that you want to keep? And when you create this culture around this idea of communication and continuous improvement, we are constantly asking and seeking out feedback. So I always encourage people, when you are doing performance reviews, give people time to share kind of what their background is. I like asking questions like, how can I support you better to do your job? Or what can I do differently that would help you do your job? Am I giving you enough feedback? Do you feel supported to achieve a work-life balance? Have I supported you enough? This is feedback that I'm looking for as a leader so that I can kind of say, well, maybe here's opportunities for me in this area. We want to be able to get feedback, but again, take it in a way that it's constructive, not getting all jacked up that people are picking on you or making you feel bad. As a part of everyday work, have I given you enough information and guidance? Were you happy with the level of autonomy or responsibility that you were given? Could I have provided you with more feedback along the way? Sometimes we think we gave enough feedback, but people want to always know, how am I doing? Again, your new staff members always want to know, how am I doing? They want that. And it helps then with getting into this called a growth mindset. So if you have somebody who you're trying to train on a new skill, they may be coming into you and they may be quite frustrated because they're not able to get it. I always like to say, well, you're not able to get it yet. Some of this may take some time. Don't compare your day 3 to somebody else's year 3. Don't compare your year 3 to somebody else's year 30. Again, you know what? I'm just not able to do it yet. You're not able to do it yet. There's some things that we can work towards. What can I do to help you feel more comfortable? How can I support you in your learning? Again, move past this idea of what if I fail and start looking more at what if I succeed. If you have a team that doesn't like to make choices because you're worried about how it's going to impact, focus on what if it actually works? Let's go to the positive route. Let's look at the feedback that way. And also, you can follow what's called the STAR method of feedback. The STAR method of feedback is basically a way for you to kind of prepare it before you actually give it. Sometimes we do impromptu feedback and we don't give ourselves enough time, and it doesn't maybe go the way we want it to, especially if you have to comment on things that aren't working well. Give yourself some time. Ask yourself, what is the end goal of this conversation? What do I want them to be able to do by the time we're done talking? Or again, what is that situation? What's that task? What's that action? And what's the result that I want? And you can, again, jot some of these things down, and here's some sample comments. I had expected you to be really frustrated by that because we had committed to it, but, you understood and told everyone that it wasn't my fault. Or, I'd like to say thanks. I feel much better about things. Again, just some tips and tricks on helping you look at the STAR approach. What's the situation? What's the task? What's the action? And what, again, is that result? And if you haven't done this as a leader, I always encourage people to do a 360. And people are like, what's a 360? Well, you take a leadership assessment or a skills assessment or an inventory, and you ask your boss to give you some feedback on what's working in that leadership assessment. Or again, you ask maybe a colleague, hey, would you be willing to give me some input, give me some feedback on this? You maybe ask your clients, hey, I'm looking at this, I want to evaluate this. Do you have some feedback for me? Your direct reports, asking each different type of group, what are you doing well? And what's one thing that you hope or they would like to have you change in the next year, the next 5 years? Do a 360. It's amazing how you start to see your perspective, because you do it on yourself. You're like, okay, check, yep, I'm a 4, I'm a 5, yep, But then maybe somebody on your team rates you as a 3 or a 2. Then it gives you an opportunity to look at some of this discrepancy and call out your teammate. Hey, I've noticed this. What do I need to do different? That becomes super important in any leadership, is to constantly be asking, how am I doing? What's going on? What are you seeing? And when you do those 360s, it gives you a chance to be open and honest with each other. There's an exercise that I do with management teams, which is called basically the strength weakness exercise, or the strengths opportunity, as I like to call it, exercise. But what you do is on your team, you have each member share positive about a behavior that they think is boosting the team and a behavior that they think is hurting the team, and commenting, giving feedback to each person. So if you've got Joe at the table, you have Jill at the table, and you have John at the table. You're going to basically, as a leader, ask Jill, Joe, and John to say, hey, I'd like you each to give each other some feedback on things that are working. Well, you know what? I really like your initiative. I really like how you did this, et cetera, et cetera. So you get a chance to share those positives. Then I ask, what could you do 1% better? And that's where people start doing opportunities. Well, I need to show up. Maybe I shouldn't call in sick as much. Maybe Jill and Joe need to be more clear in their emails, whatever it is. Getting that feedback from the people around you, the people you serve, is definitely key in helping you grow. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about giving or receiving feedback, please, of course, reach out to myself. And again, connect as best as you can. It's key. We've got to be able to talk, share our expectations, and give each other positive feed-forward feedback. So this concludes session 2. Thanks so much for being here. And go out and give somebody some positive feedback, and go out and give somebody some difficult feedback. And we'll share what worked, what didn't work, and what would you do differently next time. So thanks for being here, my friend.